Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson and welcome to Microsoft Project Made Easy. I'm a professor of construction management and I've been doing this for years with both professionals and students alike and have learned a lot from both. So what I want to cover today, if you've looked this up, is contemplated change orders, which will be kind of like doing a change order. But the difference is a contemplated change order is something you want to see the impact of it on your schedule. No project goes the way that you planned, so a contemplated change order is something that maybe the client or the consultant has come to you with, and now you want to sort of see how will this impact my project. And that's really what managing a project in Microsoft Project is all about. You want to have a plan, you want to update, you want to revise, you want to recover, but you also want to see what's the impact of changes and contemplated changes. In the case of a contemplated change, that might change the way I price out the change order itself, because I've got to decide, is this going to impact my project and the client still wants to finish on this date? And if they do, we're going to have to work overtime and weekends to be successful. You want to know this stuff, and it's not always self-evident when you're actually in the midst of a project. So it's a really good tool for doing that. So in order to do that, you would have had to have updated your schedule. Now, if you're jumping into this video and you're not exactly sure what does he mean by updating and what does he mean by revising and recovering, I have a series of videos that walk you through from beginning right through to those stages. And I'll put the description in the notes and the links. And if you subscribe and click the little bell, you'll be notified of new updates and new videos as I insert them. That way you can always sort of work through things whenever you need to know something in Microsoft Project. It's not the easiest program in the world to work with unless you're doing it every day. Then it becomes very intuitive. But if you're working with it periodically, then it's very good to have reference videos that you can come back to again and again and again. That's the beauty of YouTube, which we never had years ago. So I'm going to assume that this vertical line here is our status date, and all these activities to the left of the status date are finished. So in this particular project, it's called New Township Administrative Building. And in this particular project, we've done all of this work up to this point. The foundations, everything is in, the building systems, all of that kind of stuff is done. Even the painting is more or less completed, which, as you'll see in a minute, kind of has an impact on this change order. So the change order is going, because it's a contemplated change, they haven't decided yet whether they want to do it. They want to sort of bounce it off and see, well, what's the impact? And you want to see what's the impact, and then you want to cost it out accordingly. So to insert a change into a schedule, there's actually a technical name for it. It's called a fragnet, a fragmented network. Sounds more complicated than it is. It's not that complicated, really. Anytime you've got to change, you got to figure out, well, what are the things I need to do? What are the activities I need to do? What are the durations I need to do? What's the sequence of these activities? Can I do any of them at the same time? Pretty much everything you do into the planning of a baseline schedule. So in this case, I'm going to add this change, and I'm going to add it just above landscaping. And I have in this contemplated change, let's see, I've got 5 activities. So what I would do is I would just click and I would highlight 3, 4, 5 activities, right click my mouse and go insert task. So if you've got something that you want to insert a change into, or you just want to practice this, you can just have a practice sort of schedule, and then in the middle of it say, I want to put this right here, and just try inserting those rows and then filling them out. And that's going to be your fragmented network or your contemplated change order. So I'm going to call it what it is, CCO, and I'll say number 1, maybe this is the first one, and I'm going to say 3 electrical outlets in conference room. Maybe I'll shorten it up and I'll just say conf room. All right, and you get the drift. So there, I got 3 electrical outlets in conference room. Maybe I'll just give this column a little bit more width so it fits in the one row. There you go. And now I'm going to type in what those activities are that I've figured out what it is. If you were doing an IT project, it'd be, what are the activities for this change that we're going to have to do? It doesn't matter what it is, you're just trying to figure out the activities. In construction, we have a lot of different ideas and activities for a variety of change orders. So maybe I'm going to put fish wires for rough in. I could have just put rough in wires if you want, but I'm trying to emphasize the painting's already done, so you're probably going to have to open up some sections of drywall and fish wires, which means you're going to damage work that was already done, which means it's rework, which means it costs more. So it's always a good idea to be as descriptive as possible without writing a book. Repair drywall, tape drywall, right, and then paint. All right, so I put in these 5 simple activities, and I'm going to highlight 4 of them. This one is going to be a title. So we're creating a summary task as part of a work breakdown structure for this. I'm going to click on the Task tab to do that. And in earlier videos, I've described this, so if you're not familiar with it, you can check them out. I'm going to click the indent icon here. So I'm under the Task tab. I'm going to click the indent icon, and now it creates this heading. And this heading is in line with my building systems flooring heading. So if I'm okay with that alignment, that's okay. It's under the interior finishes, so I'll leave it under the interior finishes. And each one says it's a day, but maybe before I start, I'm going to just see where are these activities now, because this is showing over here. I'm going to put it somewhere over here. But where are they sitting right now? So to find out, you just click on any activity, click on the scroll to task. As long as you're under the Task tab, you'll see that. Very good shortcut. Well, you know what? It's at the beginning of my project, the start date of my project, right? So for sure, I'm not going to want to end up there. So you should always know when you put a new activity and it's not linked to anything, it goes to the start date of the project. So you got to make sure you're linking things and sequencing things and connecting things the way you want it to perform in your project. So I'm going to be somewhere near the end of Paint Interior. So maybe I'll just click on that one and come back to where I'm at over here. So these 4 activities, you know what? They happen to be sequential. I'm trying to keep it simple for this example, but as I said, you could have multiple things going at once. You would just put them in the way you want to run them. So it's just, if you want concurrently, you'd have them set up so that you'd have them several activities starting at the same time. If you want to have negative lags or lead times, you can do all of those things. So I'm just going to put that I want them linked, and I'm just going to go up to this link shortcut here because I've got them all highlighted, or I could have typed in the numbers over here for the predecessors under the predecessor columns. You'll see that this will change now once I click link, and there they are. All right, so now they're one after the other. Again, if I go scroll to task, I'll see them at the beginning, and they're placed there. Now let's say that our fish wires we know is going to take 2 days, and our repair drywall is going to take 1 day, and tape drywall is going to take 2 days. They're going to maybe use some Durbon 90 and shorten it up for the repairs, and the paint is going to be 2 days. Okay, so I put in my durations overall, and because they're sequential, it adds up to 7 days. And remember, this only ever counts working days, so it's not counting Saturday and Sunday. In this case, it would actually be, if you're counting Saturday and Sunday, it would be 11 calendar days, but it's showing 7 working days, so not counting 2 Saturdays and Sundays. All right, I'll go back to where I was with Paint Interior. Over here and get that back on our screen and move it along a little bit because we're going to be over in this area with it. Now you can decide, all right, when do we plan to start this? Now, I've talked about this in other videos. I really do not like to put constraints. You could put one in this case. You could do this several ways. Very often when you put constraints, it gets rid of the critical path on anything before it. Now, if this is going pretty much very close to your status date, you could put a constraint. There wouldn't be anything, really wrong with it. So that's probably one of the exceptions, I would say, that I'm not worried about it canceling out my critical path. At worst, it's just going to show this little section may be canceled out because the critical path won't display if something ahead of it has a constraint that locks it up. Critical path is supposed to be free flowing, meaning when you adjust it, it adjusts everything forward from it. But if you put constraints forward from it, it may lock it up depending on the type of constraint that you put. So let's see. Let's see the different ways I could do this. No, well, maybe I'll show you one way with the constraints. So this is December 18th, 22, right? And we'll go to December 18th. After that, and I'm going to say, maybe I'll say December 21st. And I'll put that there. And you see how this just jumps up over here. So now it's no longer at the start date. It does have a constraint though, and if I insert the indicator column, the indicator column is the column that shows you if anything's going on. You can sort of see my little constraint box there. Love the indicator column. It shows me if I did anything to activities, and it's a good clue if something is not working or functioning right, what's going on in that activity. Very, very helpful. If you placed any notes, it'll show you. If you placed a special calendar, it'll show you. So it's very, very helpful in that respect. The other way I could have done this is I could have, instead of putting a constraint, I could have put this as the predecessor to that. So this activity is ceiling tile installed. If we knew that, well, once they finish installing the ceiling tile, we're going to start this, then that's what I could link it to. Probably if I had my druthers, I'd want to start it before, but it kind of looks like they're already done, so I probably don't have time to stop them. That's the luck of the draw with change orders. You want to see how this thing is impacting you. I have that change order there, so you see how it dropped that there. Well, like I said, I could get rid of that change order. Sorry, not change order, the constraint. I could get rid of that constraint. And to do that, I just double click on the activity. I go to the Advanced tab and I say no as soon as possible. So I say no constraint. As soon as possible is the same as the default, no constraint, and that'll disappear. Now it's back to the start date, those activities. As I said, I can just put in a predecessor. Now what number is this guy? So this guy is 84. I'm going to say 84 here. Press enter. And now it's brought back up here. That would probably be my preference, just for the simple reason I do not like to have constraints if I can help it. There are some exceptions. So for those of you that are freaking out right now, there are some exceptions, but very few. This is sitting here right now and wonder how it's affecting my project. Well, I would go to the variance screen. And if you look at the other videos, you switch between screens very easily. You right click, you click the square icon box, right click, go to the variance screen. And I should be able to see if there's any variance on the project. And you see here, it's not showing any variance. Not showing any variance at all the way down. Here is my change. So that means my project's been up to date, up to the status date. It didn't have any variance. I made it simple. Otherwise, if it was probably a real project, you'd have back and forth with variances, and then maybe you recovered it, then you had variances, and maybe you recovered it, and so on. This one has 0. If you checked it and it had 10 days here, that would be fine. Then you'd know currently you're 10 days behind schedule. And then if this made it worse, then you'd know, well, then adding this to it, say it was 15 days at the end of this, then you'd know, well, it was 10 days, now it's 15 days, so this is adding 5 days to the schedule, as an example. Right now, it's not showing the impact, and I find new users make this mistake very, very frequently. They don't connect the change to what it's going to impact. Unless you connect the change to what it's going to impact, it won't show you the impact. It's an open end, and we've discussed this in previous videos as well. You want to make sure that all your activities are connected to what makes sense on your project. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to make a connection. So I'm going to go to the entry screen again, and I'm going to go down to where we are here, and I'm going to ask myself, what would I want this to connect up to? And it could be, it could be something that is, well, it can't be something that's necessarily behind it at this stage unless it's going to push something else out there. But let's assume that it's not going to affect, these are all done. The outside landscaping got all done prior to. Maybe this is one of the last things because we're going back to do it. So maybe before we start our deficiencies and punch list, because we know we got a bunch of things to do there, maybe we decide we want to link it there. If that is the case, I could probably come up with some ones that made better sense if I was running this project. And if it's your project, you know what it affects. When we got something that's tangible and real in front of us, we're not so much hypothesizing. We're like, wait a minute, I can't do this. If I can't do this unless this is done, then I got to connect it here. And then it pushes it, and then you see the impact it's having. So in this particular case, I'm going to say, well, we're going to add it to here just for the sake of displaying that in this particular example. So I'm going to put what number do you see? 91, right? The last one here that's not connected here. So watch what happens when I do that. So I'm going to connect that here. That should push this out. When that pushes this out, this should become critical. So I'm going to press enter. Do you see how that then became critical? The critical path changed off of this to this. So now that's pushed out the project as a result of this change order. This particular item is the install rubber base. So now it's got some float. It's got some more flexibility. Whereas before that, I connected that, it didn't have flexibility. This was on the critical path. And because this wasn't connected, it wasn't showing me the impact. Now, this change takes 7 days. So a lot of new users, they'll say, oh, it's 7 days. A lot of contractors, they tell clients it's 7 days. You know what? It's not 7 days. It's what it is, because we understand how the critical path works. It's going to be how much did it impact the schedule. So let's see. It should show us. If we scroll down to where we are with this, we will see that it changes to 2 days. So it's not impacting the project by 7 days. It's only impacting the project by 2 days. This one's showing 0 because it's not on the critical path. It's got float. It's got flexibility. Let's take a look at in the tracking Gantt, because this isn't so easy to tell what we're looking at in this particular view. So I slide to the left, right click, I go to my tracking Gantt chart, and tracking Gantt. And I'll just move that up a little bit. I'll go back to scroll to tasks. I'll click on paint. I'm in the task menu, scroll to tasks, so it brings it up so I don't have to go searching for it. I'm going to go to the variant screen now. And in the variant screen, there we are, and there it is. So in the variant screen, I can see that this is pushing this out. And I can see that it is delaying the project. So what actually happened here is that these activities, fish wire, 2 days, 1 day. This one activity crossed the Christmas holidays, 2 days, right? So you can see that it's impacting the project by 2 working days, from what the plan, the expectation was for the project. So I have a working day delay of 2 days. What I need to do then is think about, it's a contemplated change. What would I want to do then? If I wanted to, maybe we work 2 days during the holidays, make those working days, maybe not on the Christmas, but maybe somewhere midweek we have our painter and we have, let's see, we've got our painter. Maybe the painter comes in early, right? And actually this is the tape drywall. So maybe the taper comes in early, finishes it, and that moves up the painting. We could look at how we want to schedule our time. And then if that means, the painter says, that's going to be double time. If I'm coming during that week, that's going to cost X, Y, Z. Then you could price your contemplated change order accordingly. The other thing you could do is you could say that the project's going to take longer. The other thing you could also do is you could look, maybe there's something further down that there's no cost to being able to shorten it. maybe you say the deficiency list is not going to take as long. You probably want to allocate enough time for that, but you might have a discussion with the client that you think that you could do that in this time without charging the extra. It also depends how urgent it is for the client to finish on that particular finish date. You know, if they're opening up a store and everybody's moving in and that finishing date is hard, then you've got to be really careful about how you document this and how you cost it out and how you negotiate and talk with the client. Sometimes too, you might want to draw it out a little bit to better illustrate it. So you could, in that case, have this particular activity here, the paint activity is impacting this deficiencies punch list by 2 days. Sometimes it's useful to go to the format tool and use the drawing tools and just draw it out for yourself so you can see it better. You can draw a line and you can sort of just draw that line down, and you could say that this, actually, maybe I'll put it at the beginning of it instead of at the end. So I'll just do that again. Draw the line. And I'll explain the bars in a second in case you're not sure of that. Draw a line here. Draw another line, kind of like extension lines and a dimension line. I can usually draw it a little bit cleaner than that, but on the fly here. And then I'll put a text box. CCO number 1 delays the project by 2 working days. Activity is 7 days long and has 5 days of float before 5 days before it impacts the project. So what I'm saying by that is this activity up here was critical before. Now it's not, the install rubber base. And so this essentially goes along 5 days before it starts to push this activity. The bottom bar is your baseline. That was what you set when you when you began the project. That determined this is the benchmark for your schedule. This was the plan, right? And now this is moving the plan 2 days as a result of this change order. The other thing, that if you're doing a cost loaded schedule, and we've been looking at that in some of our previous videos, and I know some of you don't do the cost loading, that's fine if you don't. But if you do, you could also take a quick look at this point, and you could look at cost and see, does it have a variance? Was that variance there before? And if the variance is there now, it is as a result of this taking longer and having an impact most likely on your resources that are variable, that were applied to the overall project or to the construction project. If they weren't on the high level, maybe they were on pre-construction or construction. Likely it's what they're pushing the construction out 2 working days. So if I actually go to my resource table, resource sheet, right click, go down. So I'm just flowing down here. Then I can actually look at the costs on the resources that I've applied, and I can see, yes, the project manager is an extra $560, the site superintendent is an extra $1,120, and the laborers are $800. So I must have assigned 1 laborer to the entire project, and that laborer is making $400 a day, so they're working 2 days, and so that's why that $800. The reason project manager isn't as much is because I've assigned the project manager 50% to this project. They're there half the time. So 2 days would count as 1 day, as an example. I'm going to slide back here, go to my Gantt chart. Go back down, take a look here in my regular entry view. And again, this is my change order here. I can see that it's in red. I'm going to go back to my tracking Gantt. And there we are in the tracking Gantt. And we are in the variance table. And now I've determined what that is. I could also, of course, add costs to my change order. So if I was doing it with costs, I could, with my resources, have added costs to the various assigned resources to the various activities. I wasn't assuming this video was necessarily on cost loading it, but if you're into that, go back and look at one of my videos on adding costs, and you'd see that if you created resources, then you could add the costs for the electrician. I'd assign the electrician there and a cost, and I would assign the acoustic subcontractor or the drywall subcontractor a cost, and the painter a cost. And then it would sum up that cost. That cost would add up to the other variance cost, and then I know, that variance, because I'm going to have to be there longer administrating that would be an issue. All of these things add to my costs, and I have a better understanding of how this change order impacts my overall project. You have to be careful with change orders and contemplated changes. It's one of those areas where a lot of people don't make the money that they're expecting. They actually lose money. And here you've got 3 outlets we're adding to the project. And, it's probably going to cost a couple of $1,000s for these 3 outlets because you've got an electrician coming in, they're fishing wires, you're doing rework with the drywall, the taping, the painting. And the client thinks it should be costing like $500 or $600. And meanwhile, it's costing $2,000. They think you're making a boatload of money, but you're not. So that's the other thing. You got to be able to explain it and walk through it. And the more ways that you can put this together, the better it'll be for you. The other thing that I usually will do is I would use the snipping tool and take a screenshot so that I could just take this and explain it in maybe a Word document where I've got my costing broken out. Maybe I've got some photos of it to better explain it and walk the client through it very carefully so that they say yes, or at least they understand that we're not taking advantage of them. That's one thing you don't want to have happen on your projects, where the client mistrusts you. If you're being transparent and you're able to show it, it's going to be really good for you. I had one of my clients who worked for facilities, senior project manager, works on $100 million, $200 million projects, was saying they had this contractor, GC, and even on that level of sophistication, said, well, we have 5 change orders, so we want a 5-week extension. And the project manager said, no, we're not giving you a 5-week extension. Contractor said, well, each one's 5 days. So that's a week, and we've got 5 change orders. That should delay the project 5 weeks. It's like, how do you know that? Looks to me like 3 of these change orders happen at the same time, right? So it shouldn't be 5 weeks. It should be actually 3 start at the same time. The other 2 start at the same time. It should be 2 weeks. And she said she'd be more than happy to allocate 5 weeks if they could justify it and indicate how it's impacting it. But they weren't sophisticated enough to put changes into the schedule to show that. You want to be able to explain things and be transparent. So another good lesson with Microsoft Project and using change orders. I hope this has given you some indication of how you can insert a fragmented network into a schedule and check out, in this case, a contemplated change and its impact on the project. The other thing I will mention is that some contractors I know, they do like to put a heading at the bottom. They might call it change orders. And they will roll this up. So they will roll this up. And then they will pull this down, move it, and they will indent it. And so they'll keep all their change orders at the bottom, or CCOs, change orders, etc. You can put categories. It keeps all the links. It doesn't help with this. This would be only for that particular example, but it keeps all the links back up to your regular activities. So some people, after they passed it to keep the schedule more clean, they might organize their change orders down below. It doesn't mean you can't move it back up to wherever it occurred if you want to later on. You could always move it back up as an example. So sometimes that's another way of organizing the changes that way. So that's what I wanted to cover today as far as change orders. I hope that's helped you that way. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. I have a lot of construction management related videos, site management, introduction to construction, Microsoft project videos on my YouTube channel, and they're organized under playlists, so it's easy for you to follow. I'm Tom Stevenson, wishing you a wonderful day, and keep on trucking out there. Bye for now.